Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual tour of DC's Open Data Initiative. I'm Will Angel, the Chief Executive Officer of Data Community DC, a 501c3 nonprofit committed to connecting and promoting the work of data professionals in the National Capital Region by fostering education, opportunity, and professional development through high-quality, community-driven events, resources, products, and services. We're thrilled tonight to partner with DC's Office of the Chief Technology Officer. We'll be having a tour of Open Data DC. Alex Santos will be presenting on open data for all audiences. Hersh Gupta will be presenting on open data's APIs. And Alex will also present on customized open data and how to personalize open data DC for you. Finally, we'll have a Q&A panel moderated by Lauren Amos. Open Data DC is an amazing resource for citizen data science, allowing residents to access data and increase data-driven civic engagement. This is a fantastic resource that promotes engagement, transparency, and data literacy in our nation's capital. I encourage attendees to ask questions using the Q&A Zoom function. We'll have a dedicated Q&A panel to answer them at the end. I would also encourage you to visit Open Data DC, which you can find at opendata.dc.gov, and explore the data and tool as we go through tonight's tour. Finally, I'd like to give my personal thanks to the Office of the CTO and everyone involved with continuing to improve Open Data DC. As a native of the DC area, access to data about my home is very important. And I know it takes a huge amount of work and effort to run an initiative like Open Data DC. So thank you. With that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Sokol, the Chief Data Officer of Washington, DC. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Will. Good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Sokol, the Chief Data Officer for DC Government. I'm happy you could all join us today for this virtual tour of Open Data DC. Open Data DC was created to provide access to and promote transparency for government data. We provide over 1,400 data sets from across agencies across DC government, all of which you can download, create visualizations for, perform analysis against, or access as a developer. My colleagues, Alex and Hersh, will give you a tour of the platform and show you a lot of the great ways you can use Open Data DC. We also like to think of Open Data DC as a platform for engagement with DC residents and constituents. So we hope you'll find ways to interact with our team so we can continue to make Open Data DC an even better place to get DC data. During this session, we invite you to share questions you might have in the Q&A chat found at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to direct those questions to myself, Alex, or Hersh, and we'll have monitors collect those questions that are asked for the end of the presentation. With that, I will hand it over to Alex Santos.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, my name is Alex. I am a GIS analyst here with the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, and I am the Open Data DC administrator. I'm normally a behind-the-scenes guy, so I'm happy to be here to talk you through some of the work that we do. Today, we are guiding you through a virtual tour of the Open Data portal. Since we have a broad audience here tonight, we'll start with some background into Open Data, move to user scenarios, followed by describing our data initiatives, and then by the end, a look into customizing Open Data DC. And then here and there, we'll touch on some data governance efforts too. So who is using Open Data DC? We have some idea through our interactions. We can go ahead and jump to the next slide. We have some idea through our interactions, but being that it's open, we couldn't say for sure. However, we do know that we have thousands of hits happening every day. And lately, within the last 30 days, we can see that people are interested in public safety data. Open data is the idea that public information should be available to the public online. Public bodies are working with information that is about the public or collected using public funds. It is the idea that ownership is distributed between public bodies and their constituents. And because of the distributed ownership, it should be made available in a transparent manner with consideration of privacy and security. But not only that, it should be packaged in a way that serves as many users as possible. There are any number of potential users, and we hear from them just about every day. It's not just the data champion, but also the data beginner. In practice, DC government works to proactively make data available, or at least acknowledge the data's existence through our yearly enterprise dataset inventory, even though we may not be able to share it due to privacy and security. This as opposed to buried within an application or a dashboard on dc.gov. We are delivering in machine-readable formats as opposed to an image of a table in a PDF document on a file share. It can be modified, sliced, and repurposed to support a variety of outcomes. We are providing open data without prohibitive licensing or confusing language to dissuade usage. Open data should be allowed to drive innovation. Open data is not a new idea, and there are definitely plenty of definitions and thoughts. We started hearing about it in the early 2000s when data enthusiasts and data and government emerged with the open and transparent government movement. Open data became a tool for governments to promote that transparency, and use cases for government are many, including increased efficiency, establishing better data governance, and keeping government performance accountable to the public. Residents and professionals are using open data to empower themselves by observing and learning about activities that surround them, report on issues such as the 311 data, to do their jobs, and to further their education. This broad timeline describes some of our journey with open data. In 2001, we created the DCGIS program, and it established the federated data model for centralizing GIS data warehousing. We understood that sharing data freely produced a greater return on investment. And the program released its first version of a public online data catalog in 2003. This was a pretty great accomplishment for its time, but now we understand how limiting this tool was. It served a narrow audience with minimal educational context, required specialized software, and contained entirely static data. And in 2007, we created the data warehouse, the citywide data warehouse team, and released our second version of the public data catalog. This version began to support the city's open government movement with a broader range of data, not just GIS data, in near real time and with interactive features. Also, this is just a few years before the federal government released data.gov. This is also when the mayor's office implemented the CapStat program to use data as a decision-making tool. Leading up to 2016 and where we are today, the two teams merged and the enterprise data team released a cloud version of its third data catalog. The program has since refocused to better meet the ideals of open data. It's during that time that we hired our first chief data officer in 2016 and formally adopted our first data policy by mayor's order in 2017. If we were to narrow down some principles, I think these would be availability and access. Open Data DC, we are happy to say that we have 99% uptime for our data layers. The only caveat is that the open data platform itself is built using ArcGIS Hub, which is a product hosted by a vendor. So it's dependent on their services too. What is ArcGIS Hub? ArcGIS Hub is a cloud-based, easy to configure community engagement platform, which organizes people for collaboration, data, apps, and tools through data-driven initiatives. It's low code, which allows individuals like me and non-developers to manage the site. It is a crossroad between a straight-up data catalog and the educational interactive experience. All DC government open data are licensed under Creative Commons. This means you can do just about anything with it, even make money off of it. You may use the data in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests that DC government endorses you or your use case. The only request is for attribution. However, even that is rarely enforced. Nonetheless, credit is appreciated, providing the link to the license and indicate if you made any changes. And third, universal participation. Open Data DC is packaged in a way that can serve just about any user. I'd like to demonstrate 3 user scenarios of individuals who recently reached out to us for help. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. All right, so first the resident. There we go. So first the resident. Matt lives in Columbia Heights Northwest at 2623 11th Street. He normally uses the alley behind his home to access his parking. But now construction is blocking one of the entrances. And he wants to know what's going on there. He wants to know if it's legal. Jump over to our homepage. In this case, a resident has no access to specialized software for viewing spatial data, but they're curious about construction in their surrounding neighborhood, specifically a neighbor that could be illegally inconveniencing others. We will start by performing a general search for construction permit. And we can see as I type that it also includes a year. So I'm going to go ahead and punch in 2023. Oops. Accidentally hit the boundary. One thing I want to note is that Open Data DC sometimes casts a pretty big net when it comes to searches. Not only is it searching based on the title, but it's also searching on the metadata. However, in this case, we got a nice clean set of results. Let's open up construction permits in 2023. This is going to open up our Map Explorer to begin. Now, the Map Explorer includes a lot of our usual basic tools, such as searching and navigating. I'm going to search down to Matt's address, which was 2611 11th Street Northwest. As I zoom down, I can see that he's located in this little area, general area here, and this is the alley where he is concerned about the construction. This is probably the permit that he is interested in viewing. If I were to click into this, I can see the different pop-ups and find, information such as the permittee name and what has recently been going on. In this case, there are 4 different permits for that particular property, so I might have to search and click through each one to see what it is. But all of them will contain some work detail notes so that you can start to understand a little bit more about what's going on. Now, I also see a lot of other points going on around in the area. So I want to use some of the spatial tools that are available for filtering. The Map Explorer allows you to filter by a polygon, or it allows you to create buffered lines. I'm going to use a buffered line to start. I'm going to filter to this line and set a distance of just about 200 feet. And this creates a nice buffered area. From here, I can do things like favorite this particular layer because I want to go back to it, or I can share it with any one of these options here. Or of course, we can toggle our filter and download this as a CSV file, a KML file for Google, a shape file, or a GeoJSON file. I'm going to close this out, and I want to jump over to the Map Explorer. I'm sorry, the Table Explorer. The Table Explorer also allows you to filter based on some of the attribution. So it's another way for you to filter on, say, status, issued, and also toggle that as a download, and you'll have a whole different set of downloads based on the attribution versus the geography. Now, keep in mind that both the Map Explorer and the Table Explorer are basic tools. So you can't do things like create custom expressions or complex expressions. So consider the table and the Map Explorers as a nice starting point. Let's go on to our next user, the business owner. Edward is the owner of Benito's Palace on 11th Street Northwest. It's a small El Salvadorian restaurant and is mostly a takeout service. Edward would like to offer some better seating in the outdoor space in front of his location. He's heard that there are some areas of the city that offer incentives based on geography. So let's take a look at that. Open Data DC offers a few different galleries that you would see on the homepage. Some of these galleries include the latest data sets. These data sets are either recently published or perhaps they've undergone some major updates, such as major schema changes. We also have a dashboards gallery that comes from our BI program. A lot of these typically tend to be Tableau or MicroStrategy. And then we have data stories, which are an immersive experience into understanding the data using multimedia, interactive web maps, and the like. And then, of course, we also have our apps and maps gallery. If we take a look here, and I were to search just business incentive, I could see a result almost immediately right away. But I'm going to jump over to a general search, just a general keyword search up at the top right, because I want to show you a few other things. Open Data DC contains a lot of different items, content items. Sometimes you'll see data sets, and sometimes you'll see applications. Other things you can see are imagery, and sometimes you'll see documentation. So I recommend you definitely pay attention to the content items that you're looking at. Scrolling down, I could see a bunch of different data sets that probably have something to do with an incentive, but I'm going to click into this same application that was on the app gallery. Typing in Benito's Palace, 1437 11th Street Northwest, I can see that I immediately qualify or potentially qualify for the Great Street Corridors. This template, by the way, was built by another district government employee with a low-code template. A lot of our data sets in the catalog are built this way. If we go back to our data listing, I also want to highlight that we have the Great Street Corridor as a data set. And the reason I mention this is because with Open Data DC, we try to minimize the window shopping experience, meaning that if data is visualized, it should be downloadable too. All right, and in our last scenario, the graduate student. Greg is a graduate student at the University of Maryland, specializing in mobility studies and safety, with a focus on equity issues. Currently, he's in the planning stages of a project related to trails, bike lane access, and injury rates. Open Data DC makes available certain foundation data sets. They're found at the top menu here under foundational data. One of these are the roadway centerlines. Traditionally, centerline data contained only information about the street. And that was good for some basic mapping, but problematic if you needed to know things like traffic volume, directionality, lane widths, lane counts, and yes, bike lanes. Now we have an all-in-one roadway dataset providing roadway characteristics for as many use cases as possible. Our foundational datasets are featured as individual pages, and I'll hit some of those later, but let's continue with roadway centerlines. Roadway centerlines are fully documented, and they highlight some of the different characteristics found within them. If we were to go down to related data, you'll see that we have bike lanes. I'm going to open up bike lanes and favorite this just so that I could come back to it later. Let's try that again. There we go. So I'm going to make sure that I have it favorited. Now I know that I know that Greg has a few other needs. So let's just assume that he has already done all of his searches, and I'm going to search for crashes in DC. Now remember, in his scenario, we're going to need to start to create some sort of web map so he can start to visualize these. At the bottom left corner of every single content item within Open Data DC, there is a red button that says, I want to use this. If we click on that, you'll be able to see an option to create a map. And we're going to start simple. Assuming that we have already gone and favorited all of our data, I'm going to start to dig into my favorites and add those other ones. So I will add bike lanes because I just favorited that. And I will add capital bike share because I know that's something I'm going to need. I'm going to add and so forth. Once I'm done adding, I can save this to my profile. Okay, so those scenarios illustrate how browser functionality really helps any user to start to interact with DC's open data. And aside from doing those simple keyword searches, I do encourage users to look at the Data Catalog Explorer directly. And let me show you how that works. You could do that. You could get to it by just clicking Data Catalog, the button here, or you could click on the magnifying glass in any one of the search bars that you see scattered throughout the portal. This will show you everything. The Catalog Explorer is a great way to filter down by the left-hand panel if you wanted to take a look at the source, basically if you wanted anything from the District Department of Transportation, or if you wanted to search based on the different categories. You can also take a look at the collections found across the top. Something I want to mention about filtering and searches, this of course heavily relies on our metadata and the algorithms that are implemented by the vendor. We are currently undergoing a major effort within our program to overhaul our metadata. And part of this involves our newly published Open Data Handbook. And the handbook can be found under the Data Governance section and the top navigation menu. With our Open Data Handbook, we are reinforcing the need for metadata from our agency originators. We know that improvements in our metadata will help improve your search experience. By the way, how would you find this metadata? Well, let's go back to roadway blocks because it's a good example. Again, in the bottom left corner, there is a I want to use this red button. Clicking in there, you'll find your option for your metadata. It'll open in a separate menu, an XML document visual seen here as an HTML page. In addition to the summary abstracts and supplemental information, it'll give you contact information on who to call if you have any questions or email. But more importantly, it gives you the data dictionary. Every single attribute will be described by the agency originator. And this also includes any coded values or domain values, like the roadway, like the road type. The value 1 equals a street. Next, I'd like to explore a little bit about our data initiatives. Our foundation data sets are enterprise data sets used across government systems. They standardize our work and are often what we use to build our other high-quality data sets. Civic engagement sites are essentially an agency's micro open data portal, but they focus on a citywide data initiative. These sections are the result of trying to increase educational opportunities while lessening inquiries that we receive. It's not enough to just simply put the data out there. We need to improve and provide a better quality experience into learning about the data and how to potentially use it. Each of these is organized very similarly. They'll contain a documentation section, highlight the actual data sets, include some developer resources, and how to relate data with unique identifiers across other related data sets. And of course, our common questions. And I just want to hit on some of these a little bit. So addressing in DC features our master address repository. It provides a complete standardization of addressing components so that agency applications and systems maintain a clean integration. Most often, the MAR is known for its address points, but it's also a web service, a web geocoder, and includes blocks, place names, and intersections. Under our related data section, we talk a little bit about the unique identifiers that you can use for our other property layers. DC from above is one of our oldest foundation data sets. It includes aerial imagery dating back to 1995, and more recently includes LiDAR data, which is our elevation data. With aerial imagery and LiDAR, we're creating derivative data such as building footprints, roadway casings, and digital elevation models. Property lots in DC is all things property. In our complex urban environment, we have reservations, we have parcel lots, we have historic lots, and so much more. This section is rich with information about how property transactions occur. It demonstrates how to integrate property data with condominiums, and it also provides a way to integrate into some of our tax assessment data and survey plats. Public lands in DC is very similar to property lots. However, it's focused on district lands and federal lands. And then last, our enterprise data set inventory. This gets into a bit of data governance for Open Data DC. In our data policy, we are mandated to create a yearly inventory of our enterprise data sets. This inventory is an acknowledgement that a data set exists and how we are classifying the data sensitivity. It's used as a performance indicator for how we advance open data. It's used by agencies to collaborate access and to identify why a data set may not be able to be shared openly. If you want to learn more about the data policy, up at the top, you'll see data governance and click on data policy. Roadway center lines I already covered, so I'm just going to skip that one. Let's go touch on our civic engagement sites. So we are using data-driven initiatives for civic engagement. For example, the Office of Planning's Demographics Data Hub started because they wanted to feature the 2020 census. And since then, it's grown to building data profiles with a lot of the American Community Survey data. The Department of Transportation has Move DC, which is all about mobility studies. Urban Forestry is all about our beloved tree canopy. And Trails DC, about trail restoration projects. Each one of these focused on a citywide initiative. And there are plenty more. All of these include opportunities for feedback, so I would encourage you to visit them. Next, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Open Data DC API. And then I'm going to come back and talk to you about the Open Data DC community. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Hersh, my colleague.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Hersh Gupta. I'm a data scientist at the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. I'll show you a little bit about how you can use Open Data DC to do citizen data science using the Open Data DC API. So as Alex mentioned, Open Data DC is hosted via ArcGIS Hub. And the great thing about ArcGIS Hub is that it provides a REST API for interacting with data. As a data scientist, this is great for me because I can use the API to pull data from Open Data DC, which is fantastic for anyone who's using APIs because that allows for automated processes and reproducible analyses. Say I have a data set that I want to use and reuse, or I want to integrate into my application, I can use the API to do so. I can call data into R and RStudio, Python in my Jupyter Notebook, or in my JavaScript IDE and my applications and my modern web frameworks to integrate data right out of OpenData DC into my application. Now, let me give you an example of how this would work. So say you searched for a data set and you found a data set that you'd like to integrate into your analysis. In this case, the Great Streets Corridors. What you can do is click on that, and it'll bring up that Explorer that Alex was talking about. Within that Explorer, in the left-hand panel, you'll see at the very bottom, and I want to use this section. You click on that, and that will bring you a couple of options. And those options include WMS, GeoService, and GeoJSON. These are the API endpoints that you can use to query the API for that specific data set. To make this a little bit more realistic, say we're taking that GeoJSON data and reading it into our R or Python environment. What you can do is take that URL, and given that you have a library that can process GeoJSON files, you can read that directly into your R and Python environments using either the GeoPandas library in Python or the GeoJSON SF library in R. There are other libraries out there, and ArcGIS provides a full SDK, a software development kit, that you can use to interact with the ArcGIS Hub site. That way you can pull in data and repeatedly pull in multiple data sets and use those for predictive analytics, for building models, and for visualizations and analysis. Please let me know if you have any questions, but with that, I'll hand it back over to Alex.
Thank you, Hersh. So now I'm going to move into a little bit more detail into how you might customize OpenData DC. And to do that, I want to talk to you about the OpenData DC community. The community is an organization of public users interested in building their own app and data products. You can combine authoritative government data with your own. Community users can be residents, volunteers, stakeholders, and truly anyone with an interest in open data. Anyone can participate by creating a free community account and using common spatial analysis tools like buffering, aggregating by geography, and data enrichment. How would you get started? On the homepage, under Customize OpenData DC is a link to the community. Placed around the portal, you'll find follow buttons, which will initiate the registration process. It also appears under the feedback section. Earlier, you noticed I was setting favorites and saving maps. To do this, you would need to register for a community account. I used Facebook, but Apple ID, GitHub, Google, or creating an entirely separate account are available as options. With this, you can start to use the detailed map viewer to analyze data sets together. Thinking back to our graduate student, in this web map, I queried all bike lanes from the roadway blocks and used geoprocessing to summarize nearby bike injury crashes since in the last 4 years. In the second web map, I overlaid capital bike share stations onto households without a vehicle, and from the American Community Survey. I will pop over to the portal itself to show you what it looks like, and so you can get a sense of how you might get started using this. Okay. Up at the top, you'll see a sign in button. And I have already signed in using my Facebook account. I linked the two. And earlier I was doing a lot of favoriting and then a lot of searching. I'm going to take a look at my profile and see what I have there. Now, I've been working with this for a while. And so I'm a part of a few different teams. Remember, I said that ArcGIS Hub is also a tool for collaboration. And I just noticed I'm not sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Let me take a step back. Up at the top right, you'll usually see a sign-in button. If you were to click sign in, it'll prompt you to do one of few things. If you already have an account, you'll just use that. If you need to register, you'll have the opportunity to link your Facebook account, GitHub, Google, or Apple ID. I'm going to take a look at my profile because I want to show you the content there. Okay. As you can see, I'm a part of a few different teams because ArcGIS Hub is used as a collaboration tool. I have some favorites that I did while I was performing our demo earlier, so I can go back to these. And then I have some content. Earlier, I created a crashes in DC map and I added our related data sets, and that's found here. And now you can see that sort of within the Open Data DC framework, I have my own custom web map that I started with the simple map viewer. If I were to want to take this a step further, I again go down to, I want to use this, and I'm going to open this in ArcGIS Online. It's going to jump over to the community portal. If you were to open it in the map viewer, you'll get this. Now, this is a much more detailed, much more robust tool for performing analysis. You'll see the different individual layers here, and I can start to see on the right-hand side how I can interact with the data by adding filter expressions. Remember, we couldn't do this with the basic Explorer, basic map Explorer. I can start to add expressions. I can stylize the different features based on a field, and I can pick a style. You'll see throughout the map viewer that it's very organized in sort of a wizard-like approach with a step-by-step process. The vendor has done a pretty good job of including help text around the tool itself. You can even configure your pop-ups to make these a little more interesting and stylized. And then lastly, the button that I wanted to show you are the different analysis options. There are many. You can summarize data. You can find location by creating new data sets based on other data sets. You can enrich your data. Enriching data comes from the American Community Survey, the Living Atlas, and a few other authoritative data sources. Use the analysis tools to start to do things like density analysis and proximity data for finding the closest data set to a particular roadway, or finding data within a particular boundary, such as a ward. If I were to go through and stylize all this for you, I'm going to jump over to what I already did. I took the roadway center lines and I created a series of filter expressions to the right. You can see in the gray, that's all the roadway data sets, but highlighted in green based on my filter are the bicycle lanes only. And then I took the crashes in DC and I created more filtering expressions for date. So anything after 2019 and anything that involves some sort of injury towards a bicyclist. Using those two data sets, I initiated an analysis. And the great thing about the map viewer is that it saves any analysis that you previously performed. So if you wanted to run something again, all you would need to do is open up the history button and take a look at what you previously did. I'm going to open up this tool just so I can show you some of the configuration that I had. Again, it's a very wizard-like approach where you identify your input features. So I was interested in crashes in DC. And then I wanted to use the bike lanes as my filtered measure. And I added a 100-foot buffer. There are some other options where you could do calculating statistics based on other fields, but I didn't do that here. And then I give it a new name. Now, the way the Open Data DC community works is that these spatial analysis tools do involve a credit-based system, but I don't want to scare you with mentioning the credit-based system because we have plenty. However, there is this credit estimate calculator that I like to take a look. This analysis that I ran took 1.5 credits. So again, we have plenty. After performing that analysis, that's how I got my final output. Let me turn these off. This is how I got my updated bike lane roadway centerline data set that are bike lanes with injury crashes. So the darker ones contained more injuries within a 100-foot boundary. And then lastly, to visualize capital bike share stations and bike access, I used the American Community Survey data and stylized this over on the right-hand side. I chose an attribute, so I chose occupied housing units with no vehicles, and I stylized it by dividing by the total housing units within that census tract, which gave me this display. Let me jump back to my prep. With that, I'm going to jump back to our presentation. Great, thank you. So lastly, I want to mention that the community goes beyond the map viewer that you just saw. It is a suite of online mapping and data collection and visualization tools. It is both incredibly powerful and easily accessible for those that are interested. I think the community is probably an underutilized self-service tool. If you are interested in learning more about how to use it, the vendor does provide a series of free online tutorials. Traditionally, OCTO does not provide training to the public, but I imagine that we may be doing more additional focus sessions soon. So just remember that if you have your own preferred tools, Open Data DC is packaged in a way to support that through its APIs. That's it for me for now. I really appreciate you having me here, and hopefully this interests you in diving into opendata.dc.gov. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren at DC2, who's going to lead us in a little bit of Q&A.
Thanks. Let me try that again. I was on mute. So first question is for you, Alex. What are some of the most interesting data sets on the platform from your perspective?
There we go. Sorry, I should have just kept myself in video. Some interesting data sets. Well, let me take a look. So something that we haven't had for a long time would be occupancy permits. I think those could be pretty interesting. A lot of other data sets that we've recently published have a lot to do with our business portal. So we've started publishing corporate registration data, trade names. We have updated farmers markets recently. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you can find. I would take a look at the gallery of latest data sets to find some of those interesting ones. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The second question is for you as well. Have you noticed an increase in public use of the data on these platforms, given the spike in DC crime?
Yeah, actually, I was in my first slide when I looked at the top data sets in the last 30 days. I did notice that there's a spike in viewing the crime data in 2023, the ShotSpotter data set. So yes, I have seen a jump in that.
Thank you. Next question is for Hersh. Is there training data available for the, is there training available for the open data application programming interface usage?
I don't believe we have training available at the moment, but the documentation from ArcGIS is pretty robust. If you just look at ArcGIS Hub API, or if you search for that on Google, it'll take you directly to the developer documentation, which will have documents for both JavaScript and Python. I'm not sure if there's an R documentation available for the R programming language, but the Python one is generally applicable in terms of the operations and the different approaches for pulling data from open data. But no, unfortunately, we don't have one specifically for open data DC.
Thank you. A question for any of our colleagues at OCTO. I see that the handbook talking about starting the process of including a data set when an agency submits an open data set. Is there a means for the community to request data sets directly, or is the expectation that we start with a FOIA request to the relevant agency? If the FOIA is the route, how do we request, or how do we further request that the agency post the output to the open data portal and then regularly update the data set?
I can field this one, Lauren. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I would recommend that you email us at open.data@dc.gov. That's the best way to communicate with our team, and just give us some information about what data set you're looking for, what agency you think it belongs to, and what exactly you're trying to do with it. From there, we can go reach out to agency data officers from within that agency and see if the data, if it exists already and it's not out open data, or if it is in our inventory and is potentially classified under the DC data policy that it's not available for release due to various information related to PII and other types of sensitive data. If it is able to be put on open data, we work through that data curation process with the agency in order to try and get it out there and establish it, a regular update process for it, which is generally determined by the owning agency.
Great, thank you. Another general question, does Open Data DC have data on the usage of Open Data DC?
We have, yeah, sorry, I can take that one. On its usage, so ArcGIS Hub does provide some engagement metrics, and in the beginning of my presentation, I had just a screenshot of the last 30-day engagement. We recently started using Google Analytics 4 within Open Data DC, and because Google deprecated its previous universal analytics, so we lost a lot of our former metrics, but we do have Google Analytics 4 that we could do reporting. I know that with in collaboration with our BI program, our BI team, they are looking into building a dashboard that will show those sorts of metrics from Google Analytics 4, but we don't have that yet.
Great. Well, thank you. That was the last question that we have. I'm going to hand the ball over to Matt to close this out. But before doing so, just a quick thank you from the DC2 community, not to be confused with the data community that OCTO was discussing today, but the one that will introduce Data Community DC. I want to ask a favor of the attendees today. In the chat, if you could please let us know if you'd like us to host a data dive or a hackathon so that you can play around with the Open Data DC platform in a team setting. If you haven't attended a DC2 data dive or hackathon in the past, I can share that they're fun, they're non-competitive, they're hands-on, it's a great group learning opportunity. They're perfect whether you're a seasoned data scientist or just data curious, whether you're a professional or a student, whether you're highly technical or not technical at all. Maybe you just like to draw pretty pictures, or you have really genius ideas that need a data science then to bring them to life. In fact, some of the coolest visualizations and solutions that I've seen come out of our hackathons have been developed with pencil and paper. So all backgrounds are welcome. And at DC2, we really believe that diversity drives innovations. We do a lot of team-oriented activities. So again, in the chat, before we wrap up, if you could just let us know if you'd be interested in learning more and exploring Open Data DC in a data dive or hackathon, we'd be happy to host one. So with that, thank you again. And I'm going to pass the ball to you, Matt.
Thanks, Lauren. So as we wrap up this virtual tour of Open Data DC, I'd like to mention some of the ongoing and upcoming efforts for our platform. First and foremost, more data. We continue to work with our partner agencies to identify and discover new data sets that can be made open and available. Almost equally as important, we continue to improve our metadata content so that everyone using the data can gain a better understanding of where open data is gathered from, how it's structured, and what it means. We very much appreciate everyone who participated in today's event, and we want to continue to do more of these engagements, whether it's virtual tours, data hackathons, or more focused deep dives. Our engagement is in part driven by your feedback, so we absolutely welcome your comments. Open data has been an incredible tool for transparency and engagement, but over time, we've added a lot of data, and for those who are looking for answers but are not great with data analysis, it can be challenging to find what you need quickly. With the rise of generative AI and tools like ChatGPT, we are looking to leverage this technology in a useful way in open data. And so, coming soon, we will be deploying an open data AI chatbot where we can enable you to ask very specific questions, both via chat and voice, to search for specific data and get back a reliable answer, and then allow for further analysis. Again, I want to thank you all for attending this virtual tour, and a special thanks to our partners, Data Community DC, and the OCTO team members who presented and